as we've ever had for anything, so this is just great. I'm Chuck Edelman, I know most of you, and today I think I'm not going to do very much talking, but just a little bit. A couple of things to start out with. We're trying out our new sound system now, and within the not too distant future, we'll be able to show movies here, and we'll have speakers. I can't see that a lot of people come. So we're encouraging everybody, we're not paying for this, but it doesn't cost. This would be 20 hours a week. This is for me, by certain qualifications. And but 20 for the weekend is not bad. It's a kind of an interesting job. And because I talk to them. As you know, we'll be here on Saturdays, and the society is here on Mondays as well. But we need volunteers and the museum here between 10 and 1 o'clock is. But us, I don't have a pencil. Can you do it?
What's a pencil and a pen?
Pencil, yeah, and we do train. So it's the other one. The Lux Senior Class have a show here. I come and see what the kids are doing. They're only trying to be in the 12th because, well, we won't have a regular. The next that we'll be having probably beginning of, let's see, 1st of June will be geologic history of here. This has been waiting long. It's on brainchild, Dan, but as we would wait long, but we'll get that on the 1st of June. And then finally, we lost Peters, of course, months ago, and he's hard to replace, but we do need board members. We have about 3 boards there, there's 2 of them for, and if anybody inclined at all to set a board for the Historical Society, I would love to have you. You have the occasion to speak up. Oh, you could give a short slide slide.
Yes, Judy thought we should show off our new sound system and our new projector mounted thing. Got about a 35% chance that this is going to, because it's our first problem.
What'd you say?
Well, let's see here. See, the projector is up above, so I couldn't get up there and get moving, so that was one thing we noticed. Okay, so I'm going to try the sound system. This is out of the light speakers. Well, you can raise it up. Why don't you raise it up part way? Just a little bit.
Otherwise, I'll just reach my stuff out. Maybe really backwards. Probably not going to break it.
Yeah, that's fine.
I think I can reach this stuff. I don't need a minute now. Wow, what a great. How many days? Oh, everybody's got something. Our speaker tonight is Marguerite Hallquist, and her family with the early Danes that settled over in Bone Lake. And Marge has spent most of her life living in Denmark and Sweden, and kept her nose and go to a folk camp over in Denmark in the 50s, and to Callister College, and then she got her master's degree at Minnesota, and she's been part of the Danish Society in the Minneapolis for years, along with Thora. And so great to see so many people with so much to hopefully share later. was president of the Comic Historical Society for several years and really led that along. For the Geology Society, and Amory has a real interest in the knowledge of the history in this area and in Denmark and Sweden and the world. Is just really, it's fun to go to her house and have a cup of tea or tea and beautiful cups instead of mugs. And so I'm proud to introduce Marjorie to know. I'm sure she'll go as she has and back a little bit.
Thank you, Judy. I'll see you here. I have the Danish Pioneer here, which is a newspaper that maybe some of you are familiar with. And it is one that Thorpe was from Bulgaria originally. I'm half Swedish, saying something about the Swedes. Well, anyway, and he knows who he is. Amory, from Lake Township, and her mother and father both came from Denmark. And the father, J.P. Gregerson, came from the which right here in Peastead, and it's quite near the new bridge now that goes across and Mary. And he came to America first from through Bremen, and then went to Oregon. I don't know why, if he was looking for gold or what, but anyway, he didn't stay long. Went back to Denmark and got a draft, and so you have a picture of him, a photo of him in a uniform with his fort around him, and he's very proud. And he came right back to the United States. And this time, he knew Duholm was from the same village that he was in, Oddby, and that Duholm was a Bull Lake. Some of the other Duholms, if you go to that area of Teestead, Denmark, you see Jeffter Church. I think there are some of those which have Duholms in the cemetery. And but this and then my grandfather had a farm in Bull Lake Township, 1887. A few years later, my grandmother came from a little village. See, the Limfjord goes all the way through this area. She came from a village across from Aalborg, and as she was working, or came to care of a little girl, and the mother of the girl was had a sister in Minneapolis, Mrs. A.M. Smith, and her husband had one establishment on Nicollet Island. It was quite well known in the early in 1890s and early 1900s. One of the people that worked with Mrs. Smith was Karen, and how the two got met their respective husbands, I don't know. There are various stories, but Karen married Chris, Carter's grandfather, the first Chris Duholm, Chris Varsov Duholm, and the area right north of Woodby, where he evidently came. And my parents were married at the Stanford Church, and then later, of course, they were in the Bull area, Bull Lake Church. And as you know, our church is Grundtvig. I don't know how many of you know the name Grundtvig. You do. Theologian who was of the Happings. The West Denmark Danes, Bull Lake Danes belonged to the Happings. And the sad days, I suppose you'd say, were those that pulled away in St. Peter's Church, home of those days, the intermission group called intermission. And so it was interesting that they came here, and in the 1950s, I went to a group in Minneapolis, or actually United States, that wanted to go and study in Europe, and I belonged to the group that went to study welfare systems in Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, and Finland. And it was a very small group, and with the president in the United States, the chairman, honorary chairman, so we had a lot of things. We could get to a lot of publicity because of her name, and the fact that one of the sponsors, one of the boards, were too, and it met her, my teacher. We went to a folk school in Reading. And Reading is here, in here somewhere. We landed at Esbjerg and then by bus across to Reading, which was a folk school. And Denmark, of course, had many folk schools, and this one was in 1844. But it had a rough beginning. It was for young farm boys, and from the middle part of Jutland, I suppose I say Jutland. And anyway, the school was one in which you had lectures every day, and I don't know what the folk schools in this country and the one at Tyler, how long they continue, but they're, well, still do, still retreats. But this one, West to have folk school too, and but they were unsuccessful. They didn't get enough people, and the government sponsors pretty much piece for the folk men's education, and there's a lot of folk dance of other things that go along with the lectures, and it educates the people in that mostly Jutland area. They say that very few ever go from that direction, but they do come from the middle part of Denmark. And that was one experience. It was a wonderful experience. Then Thora Framstead here, who was with me, and I went to older hostel at Dana College. Dana is of the intermission, or the Sad Danes background. And unfortunately, Dana College was closed recently in the last year. And great lectures, and it was a week. Wonderful the Danes that came to Nebraska. There were 10,000 in Nebraska. And Wisconsin, I guess they had 17,000. The total immigration of the Danes by the U.S. government are over 362,000. But then when your regions, they had 800,000 and 1,200,000. So the Danes are scattered throughout. And when they came, we'll say when they came in the beginning, the first ones that came to this area came in Søren Petersen, his great-grandfather came at that time. And if you get a chance to read his book, Gamla Smith, this is a wonderful wonderful story of great-grandfather.
We have some of those available.
Because it really tells about the pioneer, how he was seen, and how he and his family, after 50 days on the boat in the Atlantic, and then finally getting here on the way up to Nina, where there were a lot of Danes, and eventually getting over to Luck, where he bought a small farm and became the blacksmith. Well, the blacksmith was a good trade at that time, and he was able to make a living. And he also was the one help from the West Denmark Church. A blacksmith in Denmark made maybe 85 cents a day. This is the figure West, that's still in Illinois, so they say 85 a day. And in America, $2.81 a day for a blacksmith. So they were people to come because of prices, and they felt that girls that go out in Denmark that are age 14 after confirmation get very little. They probably would get $2.50 a month, where it was over $10 a month as the average. These are figures that are statistics give out anyway. So a farmhand here made a great more than a farmhand in Denmark. So that's one of the reasons why many came. I know that in the genealogy, grandfathers or the great-grandfather was a husband. And which means he was a small worker on a farm. Maybe when you look at the village now, it's just nothing, it's a few houses. They evidently lived in the village and went out and worked. And that part of Denmark, if you ever get there, when you get there, you'll notice has a lot of wind. And the grass, like you had for us, it blows, and it's beautiful to see, but it's windy, that west coast. And that coast is the North Sea, and it's a fishing area. The Limfjord was pretty much fishery. People fished eel. You know what an eel is? I don't know, I don't really like them. But anyway, the Danes were eel. And one of these, this visit one of our relatives, and he was an eel fisherman, and you see the other fellow there. On the Limp Fjord, these were the ones in the eastern from, and you have the boats and Crow, you know where the Crow, K-R-O, see that Denmark, you see the, I think I got a picture, it's the village inn, and usually that's where the celebrations are held. You know, when we went to the history celebration in 93, held at a Crow. And also, you still see the brook there. And originally, when I first saw them, they were fire hazards, but now they're pretty much take care of it, either patch or tile. Before I go on, I just want to show you something. Can you spin in the fire? It's an Ebelskate with it had a whole thing on it. The old that gave it to me was very early, and he said it's 1826. And I don't know why he had the date. He had that date on him. It's silver too. But he himself ate with a hoe, and he would put the spoon up over as a low, as you can see. And there were beeves, and he'd eat, and then he'd put a spoon up there. And these cover that family, and this jug is very too. But one more thing I'd like to show you is, well, this is the boat that most people came on after 85 or so, the Tingbala. This is what the women wore, used around their head. Photo of one of the ancestors here with it. And here are these scarves, and this one is art now. It does have a few because of the age. But if you see this in some of the displays of the names, that's what you will see. So that was something. And I don't know if you maybe have any questions on before we get started on yeah.
You said that people working here made more money, cost of living higher.
Yes, it would be well compared to Denmark. Yeah, yes, it would be. In Ed Peterson's book, he really talks about how much they paid for things and when they began to use a horse with an oxen, and that is always very interesting. Denmark does have freedom of, well, actually 1849 was when the church had Grundlov, which means constant, and June 5th in Minneapolis, the Danes that are left and belong to the Danish Immigration Center do have Grundlov Day Fest, and I think we know about that because our parents, they have Linsma, and I do an organization for the lungs, and it's an intergenerational magazine. I mean, everything goes out to charity. This past year, $1,400 went out to very charity, and they're all mission here. And it's just, I suppose, not about 50, that's it, meet once a month, and it's very active, it's been active since 1938. The Danish Immigration Center, if you want to know who they are in Minneapolis, the membership directory, it's the newsletter. The Danish American Heritage Site, which used to be Junction City, Oregon, which is a big, well-sized Danish group, puts up the bridge. And this is what Laura has. I don't get it because half of it is in Danish and half English, but it's a very interesting paper that comes. Something. Okay, if there are any other questions before we get started, so you can hear where you came from. And I know that, let's just start. Where did your ancestors come from? Okay.
My grandmother
Yes.
came from Ireland, which is down there.
Just a second. Turn the microphone on. Excuse me, there's two buttons.
Oh, okay.
And my father's small island of Morse up there in the Limfjord. My
grandfather and grandmother and 4 children. The oldest was 10, and the youngest was a baby 3 months old. And this lady is also related, and her brother's skull. Yeah. I think my grandparents met on the ship coming over. Okay. Because she was Anna Jurgensen and he was Elf Skull. All right, the moon here is there somewhat must be farther south, and the birth rate had gone sky high in Denmark because of better health and so forth. Okay, Judy, what about the Jensens?
So why don't you, get up there and point it out on the map, and then I'll get you on the movie here.
We have Jensens and Caspersons, but I'll talk a little bit about Jensens, which up in this area, given I know the thing. But I just have one cute little story about a few years ago through the internet. I was able to contact the farm that they worked on, and it is still run by the family that did it, and they grow berries. But the interesting part of this story is there was a good chance we could have gotten that big farm, because in the late 1700s, Anne Catherine married Horace, who was the owner of this large, most farmers were really, really poor, or they worked at farms, and there's a few like claims, and this is what it was. Well, Anne Catherine and Horace were marriers who didn't have any children, and he died, and 55 years old. After he died, she got pregnant. And after she had this little baby, she married my great-great-grandfather, Jensen. I thought that it would have been my ancestor too. So I wrote a lot, I was translating this Danish, which I didn't know how to do. And I wrote it up, and then I sent it to the Danish man on the farm to see if he has the history I have back hundreds on that farm. He said, well, you made a mistake. It wasn't your grandfather's son, it says the son of Anne. I think the story more interesting is she did not, Anne Catherine didn't have any more, but her servant girl Elsie Marie started having them, and Catherine died, and Jensen Elsie Marie. And it's their children that I'm descended from.
How about
talk a little about Caspersons? Yeah, they came from over here in Roskilde area.
he brought a lot of things, a lot of artifacts.
Oh yeah, would you, on the bottom, and would you take this and talk about, this is Martin Casperson, his cousin was removed. We wish he would have removed further, but he didn't. But we have an interesting family side too, and the Casperson is quite a crew. But then, talking on the genealogy, I did not have an older sister. That was before sisters, Christian, whatever, a whole bunch of names. Casper right here. So they had one child before they were married. Okay. They didn't live too long. She died of a breast disease. I don't know if it was cancer or mastitis or whatever she died of, but anyway, she died of that. And what else have I said? Anyway, that's why there was a big population of it. But Mark, I like to ask this to you
a lot of things.
This material I have here just came in a trunk. Don't have any history with it at all. I never seen when I was growing up. It was just a trunk that I inherited or ended up with. We don't have two Bibles, but one was to a woman and one had a Bible. My grandfather lived in this country for a number of years. He served in the local government, and on the board and town board. Somebody found out he was on the United States. He had assumed he was, but he didn't realize it never occurred that way. So he had to go through and did that 9 days after he had here quite a while. His wife was a Christian. It's Johnson over in Red River Valley area, and my friend married her in Oak County, Minnesota, and they moved here into the Cushing area and farmed. Grandpa started the New Home Cemetery, or was one of the charter members of the cemetery. There are a number of my grandmother's family, sister, and her sister's family in the New Home Cemetery. do one thing here though that I haven't put out yet. It looks like a pipe. I had a cover at one time, and the cover has been broken off. But that's anyway. Grandma, 80s. See somebody put head in and all that. I have an item here that I have no idea what it is. It's heavy, I hook on it. Everything where I certainly don't know. When somebody went to the truck putting that picture, there's a picture of a lady in glass, under this glass with, I guess it's, what do they call it? Material on it. I guess they had all that in.
Is that what that is?
I guess this was, yeah.
Is that is? I thought it was maybe a nutcracker.
Also, we had over here a scarf, or a shawl, rather. We had over here.
You got those books just to the side there.
Capitalization is in that frame. That's all I can tell you. Now, we were in Denmark a few years back. We do have a modern Denmark, but we never found where Mother farmed. Two of my aunts were over and they did look around for it, but they did not find it. We did visit a family in Copenhagen, and he showed me his own book, and it had quite a long list of Caspersons. Thank you.
Thank you. Ted Zinn back there, and he probably can identify some of those, because he does that. I mean, he's...
I asked her, she did not really love this West Denmark area film. And then,
I'll see.
yeah,
I didn't know that.
right next to my west. So, I'm sure we have others in what, where, who it was that brought you here.
Myrna,
Have come to get you, go over to the edge and face way, okay? Or face the...
Well, great-grandfather, Peter Johnson, came from Moon. There. Well, it's here. But this is, and we were there 3 years to find as much as we could. We the city gate in T-E-G-E, Stega, you don't pronounce. And we found that, so we went there that he was the son of one, Johannes Beck. And his father, Johannes, but that's as far back as that story goes. We also know that he came to this country and built a farm 3/4 of a mile east of the coffee, and then went to get his bride, who the deal had been made. So I married his sister, and they came over here to the farm. And my grandfather's side came from a place down here in Milan called Boveland, but actually they say Boveland. And we went to rent a car, and they asked where we're going. I said, "Oh, we're going to Boveland." And he had no idea what I was talking about. I had the map out, and I showed him where it was, and he said, "Oh, Boveland." So find that little community, I wouldn't know what they would say, but fun place to go.
thank you. Myrna, you and Lynn for the something. Myrna Salmon, her name is.
Well, just to tell you a little background about me. My husband and I have a cabin in Balsam Lake, and we spend the summer here. And we have an apartment in Minnesota, the city. And we've been lucky to see fire. Anyway, I was talking to Marge, telling her about my mother's side, how way back my great-grandparents came to America. They came to Wisconsin. They had 2 small children and one on the way. They could find to live was in railroad cars someplace here in Wisconsin. The railroad car was a different family, a different nationality. And so her husband went up to northern Wisconsin shopping. He was going to come back in November, Thanksgiving, when it was time for the baby to be born. He got back here and found out he was already here. And with the help of the neighbor lady, they delivered the baby. And And he came back in November. He said, this is no place to raise a family. So he decided to move them all to southwestern Minnesota, Tyler, Minnesota. He was born and raised, along with Lynn. Yeah. But anyway, so he moved there, built a house south of Tyler, and he got a lease from the minister, Mark. His father died, and he had to do something about his send money to help support her in the poorhouse or send her to America. So he sent money for her to come to America. She didn't follow the rules, and somehow got off the ship and went wandering around New York City, the street, where, where she was to go, but thought French. So he sent her to Canada, and so discovered that she was speaking Danish. That they knew about this community in Southwest Canada, so they sent her down there. And somehow they humiliated Jennifer Denmark, who notified Lars, her son. And every day and finally she was finally on the train. So she came with her little black satchels, a spinning wheel, and something else. And so we went out to the farm, saw a house, and in the corner of the room he had built a bed for her, which until the next spring when she died. But and the first son was born in the sod house by my grandfather.
Yeah, thank you. All right. There's Clayton, he's a lawyer that.
I hadn't studied much about Danish immigration until a month or so ago, and it surprised me when I had done a Swedish geology. They came right up to Stillwater and came to Churchill. But most of the Danes, they were first received places, and then there was so much communication in the Danish communities. The blacksmith in this one here. So I found this very interesting.
No, I just came to listen to some interesting things. Maybe one for the Lake Town people. My wife was Danish, and her great-grandmother was one of the early settlers, but he died early in Lake Town. But anyway, her name was Karen Marie, and my wife is Karen Marie Matson, but her great-grandmother, a cousin to Hans Christian Andersen. And Hans Christian Andersen, sometimes you don't know if you're going to be a relative or not. But the way that goes. And then about immigration up here, my family, great uncle was a miller from Winnie. He operated windmills, and he came over here, and they encouraged him to settle out in Bone Lake back in 80s, late 80s, built a big gristmill, big mill, and later he moved it over to Memphis by his farm. But there are relatives, Billstrips, that wanted to come over, the Billstrips and Munsons out to this country, have sponsors. So my grandmother was a sponsor for one, and my uncle was a sponsor for Mrs. George Munson. But when she came over, he had to be the cook in his saw, grist, and feed mill all in one lake until she met George, I suppose, and they went on their own. Then Iowa, where all the Danes were down there, because he thought that would be the farming state. But then they encouraged him, the other Danes, to come up luck. Where they are, and that year they put the railroad in. He bought his cows, furniture, in railroad cars, and brought the whole thing up from Bone Lake.
Of the Bone Lake grist mills, right out there of the picture, right of the photograph.
When Jurgen the Miller was what they said, Jurgen the Miller. And
JP, everybody keep that to do.
there are some other people in here. How about
Vicky.
Vicky was Vicky Asper. But she was.
To full day.
Is it turned down there? Button up.
I'm married to a full day, Mark Johnson, and his family. So they came to Dane, Rusty, and North Dakota where they ended up. But I want to add on to Harry's of the Peter Johansson. There are 6 of us here tonight that are Peter.
Is that right?
Yes. There are 2 from the first generation, and then there are 3 of us. 3 of us are second cousins, and then my daughter is with, so that's the next generation. Anyhow, Harry told the story about he came in 1870, and he went back and he got married.
The intermission, the sad Danes, and the Grundtvig Danes, the happy Danes. And of course, that's what broke up the West Denmark seminary, the seminary in 1891.
So I'm a Swede, but which ones of the 2 are going to be in hell, and which ones are going to be in heaven now?
We have a joke.
Joyce? That haven't had a chance to talk. Joyce, do you have anything?
No, I'm a Norse. I've been enjoying this a lot.
Lynn?
Well, if you're really interested in the history of the Danish Lutheran Church, I'm going to push the Luck Library, because the Luck Library has in their collection a book called The History of the Danish Lutheran Church in America. And then they also have a book in the Luck Library that's called Danebold. And the West Denmark people would know about Danebold because that's where the folk school in Tyler, Minnesota is held, because that's centered around the Danebold community, which is kind of, it's on the other side of the highway. Highway 14 goes right through Tyler, and on the south side of Tyler. And the actual commercial part of Tyler is on the north side of Highway 14. And Danebold is a Danish community as such that's centered around the Danish Lutheran Church in Tyler. But they also have several buildings. They have a dormitory there, and they have a,
Used to be a college.
yeah, and there's another hall there that's used for different things. I yeah, I have pictures of the stone hall in my book, because that's where my grandfather and grandmother ended up. But when I was doing the history of my family coming over to Denmark, my family came over quite late, actually. They came in 1905, 1904. And when I was doing the research for this, back in Denmark, there was around 1864, there was a large population explosion, and so the economics of Denmark could not support all these people. And so as they became young adults and adults, they left. And so my grandfather was born, I think, like in 1875, and he came to the United States in 1905. And he came purely for economic reasons. There just was not work for him in Denmark. And back at around that time, there was an organization, and I don't speak Dane, so I can't tell you the Danish name of the newspaper, but there was a Danish folk society that had like a little newsletter. And this newsletter would go back to Denmark, and it would tell all these young people about all the opportunity in America. And that's what kind of encouraged them to come over. And then also at around that time, the railroads were selling land really, really cheap. And so then that was another encouragement to come over, because they could get land then. And so there was just floods of, by the 1900s, there was just floods of Danes that came to America, and there's kind of a belt of Danes that are right through the central part of the United States, which includes Wisconsin, Illinois, Minnesota, and Nebraska. And my grandparents didn't come through Ellis Island, they came through Boston. And my grandfather had a brother that came over first, and he was in Vermont. And then from Vermont, my grandfather, and this, family history's got it all screwed up, but they came to Racine first. And they only stayed in Racine for 6 months, but then there was ties to some relatives in southwestern Minnesota, which is Diamond Lake part, which is Lake Benton, which is close to Tyler, and so there was just all this big connection right in there. And that's how my grandparents ended up in this country. And my grandfather was not a farmer, but he did farm some here in the United States. And really was a tradesman, and he knew how to work with concrete, and he learned how to do that in Denmark, so the story goes. And he must have known a lot about Denmark, or about concrete, because he, in the first census that he shows up in, he lists his job as a farmer, And the next census that he shows up in, he lists himself as a proprietor, and he started a concrete block business. And that business is still there, but they don't make block anymore, but they have ready-mix concrete. And my dad is one of 11, and I don't know of a brother that my dad had that did not work in concrete in their adult life. And they either owned the concrete plant in Tyler. My dad left Tyler because the business wasn't big enough to support all of the families. And so he left, and then we ended up in Minneapolis. And he worked for a Danish construction company.
Anybody else? There are several people that we haven't heard from.
I have an aunt who married a man from Lux, however. Total surprise to me, and I didn't believe the story, and I went down to the Polk County courthouse, and sure enough, there it was in the records, and they were married at West Denmark.
A list that tells some of the names where I have found where they came from and what I've collected from this area. I have a more complete list that tells a little more, but how many have found their name or their ancestors' name? The family information on the different families in this book, so if your family isn't on there, I would love to have your name and your ancestors' name and anything else about them so we could have more complete about any place in Polk County that has Danish. I want to get it in the book. And also, this map here, in red are the names of the places that I found that the different people came from. So I've listed over here, I don't know how to pronounce these words, I don't understand. And so it shows where the main places that they came from. And then I think I passed out a sheet with just some of the highlights that I learned this last month when I was studying it that was interesting to me. And what else am I supposed to say? Oh, one thing that was interesting to me was, my family, when the Jensens are from Eureka, I always wondered, were they Baptists before they came, or did they become Baptists, or were they Baptists in Denmark? And in studying this, I did find out that the first man that came from Denmark came and started the Baptist church. His name was Willard, and they were from a Baptist church in Denmark. So, it doesn't prove that my family was Baptist before they came, but it's probably likely. The music tonight and the pictures are from a book I have here that's lovely.